Thank you, Cearloch. Okay, so this bill obviously deals with matters that are very important for our society, for the people of this country, for our environment, and for many of the challenges that we face. Obviously the very acute housing crisis that we have to address, matters of climate change, addressing those, and infrastructure. I need to develop the infrastructure necessary to sustain our society, and then obviously key matters such as environmental justice, the access of ordinary people to justice when it comes to planning and development matters and matters that impact on them. So it is terribly important to address these matters, and therefore the rationale for trying to improve and streamline those processes, on the face of it, is a reasonable objective, and to make things more efficient and more streamlined and consolidated, which is, if you like, the main rationale that seems to be being put forward by the government. But I have to say, from my point of view, and we've heard evidence from others here and those who are experts in this planning area, we're not off to a good start with this bill in that regard. We have a bill of 700 pages that was published a week ago. So for those of us who aren't on the Housing Committee, who have commitments for other committees, in my case 3 other committees, simply wouldn't be possible to have gone through the pre-legislative scrutiny process, to have to try and grapple with all of this 1 week after the bill is published. That's 100 pages a day, if you had the time to do that, which self-evidently we haven't. I personally doubt the Minister has read this bill. We've already heard that the chair of the committee that deals with it hasn't read the bill, and I doubt very much that many of the people who've spoken here today have read all of the bill. And I want to reiterate the concerns, therefore, about the information that is available to us, and this is not in any way a criticism of the officials who would have produced the explanatory memorandum or the Library and Research Service. Far from it. They must be in a desperate state trying to grapple with producing information and analysis and summaries of this enormous piece of legislation to try and make it a bit understandable for us, but that sort of time frame simply doesn't allow it. And that is the government's decision. That's a ministerial decision to have that very short time frame available to the officials, to the Library and Research Service, to the public, to Oireachtas, elected members and so on, to try and grapple with and understand what this bill is doing. All 710 pages of it, 22 parts, 541 sections and 6 schedules. And that's why it wasn't a trivial point I was making earlier on when I said the Minister should have taken us through every section. People should be aware of this. Generally speaking, when ministers come in here and introduce bills at second stage, they go through every section. And I agree, that's a big task when you've got a bill of this scale. But to imagine that we could get a reasonable summary of this bill in 20 minutes from the Minister is just preposterous. Right? It's frankly an insult to the members of this House and to any member of the public who might be taking an interest in this bill. And the failure of the explanatory memorandum to align with the bill itself has already been highlighted, but let me do it again. as it was said, section 17 refers to, this is just one example that we can pick out, this section in the explanatory memorandum says this section provides for the evidential value of the development plan. So if you're looking for a summary, that's apparently what section 17 is about, but when you actually look at section 17, it refers also to the National Planning Framework, the National Planning Statements, Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy, Urban Area Plans, Priority Area Plans, Coordinated Area Plans, in addition to the development plans and the relevant standards and bodies for certifying such materials. That's a small section of the bill. Now, if the explanatory memorandum in section 17 does not align accurately with what is in the bill, we've got a big problem, because it now means we can't trust the explanatory memorandum. If we can't trust it in one section, we can't be certain of it in any section. So we are dealing with a major problem, deficit of information. And then we have the Library and Research, and fair play to them, I don't know how they've done it, two documents, Note 1 and Note 2, but none of them do what most of these sort of things do, which is take you through every single section of the bill. And indeed, how could they in the time frame that is available? So I reiterate, that is not a criticism of them. They're being asked to do the impossible, and they couldn't do it. Not surprisingly, they couldn't do it. What we get is background, we get some fairly general summaries of different parts of the bill, but not that detailed explanation that we actually need to understand, because what this bill is doing is replacing a bill of 800 pages. Where are the lists of the differences? I mean, one of the phrases that is repeated in the various documents we have been given, referring in the explanatory memorandum, says this section reenacts or largely reenacts what was in the previous bill, but with modifications. Sometimes with many modifications, sometimes with substantial modifications, but we don't have a comprehensive list of what the modifications are, what was the rationale for the modifications. That's the sort of information we need. Because in fact, in order to understand this bill, you have to cross-section it completely with, cross-reference it with the previous bill of 800 pages to actually understand what the hell has changed here. What are the differences in all these, what is it, how many sections again? 500 and whatever it is, 541 sections of the bill. What was the reason for this change? What is the change precisely? And so on. I mean, we're being asked to do something that is virtually impossible. And the government couldn't even give us an extra week. And of course, this makes you worried straight away. It makes you suspicious. Maybe rightly, maybe wrongly. But in the overview document of Note 1 from the Library and Research Service, certainly my ears prick up in the third paragraph. A recent industry referred to this is the overview of the bill, and it refers to a recent industry survey revealed that property professionals believe that a streamlined planning system would be the most effective way of improving housing supply. The survey, which was carried out at Mason, Hayes and Curran's annual property conference. Very encouraging indeed. That's one of the first references we have. The survey, which the conference was called Planning and Building for Tomorrow in May 2023, was attended by 500 industry professionals and include a panel discussion on the bill. The survey found, not surprisingly, that 91% of the conference attendees believe that streamlining planning would have the biggest impact on boosting housing supply. It also found, fairly ironically, that 57% of the same industry professionals who were in attendance think the bill will have no impact on reducing bottlenecks in the planning system. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. So they all want planning streamlined, and we know why that is, because when do they ever stop jumping up and down saying it's the planning process that is the problem for them? and we hear that then echoed by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael deputies that this is the problem, but then we get a bill which is essentially, may well be, let's put it that way, dancing to their tune, but they have absolutely no confidence themselves that it will make any difference, even from their point of view. But you see, what I find worrying, and this is where the question of the rationale for all of this is important, what is the rationale for the changes, is something I've referred to, and in fairness the Library Research Service referred to it in one of the notes, I can't remember which one, is the Oireachtas report produced by Public Expenditure and Finance, I think, report a couple of years ago, where they actually, first of all, what they say is we don't really have a sufficient evidence base to really assess whether the planning process is actually in any significant way an obstacle to the delivery of housing and infrastructure. But we need more evidence, right? All of which is lacking here for the rationale, the justification, the evidence base for what we're actually doing. But what they do point to, as I have pointed out on a number of occasions, is looking at, over a certain period of time, at the planning consent process for residential development. What do they actually find? They found there was no problem with planning permissions by and large. By and large, 85% of planning applications get permission. 85%. Varies in different areas, and they give reasons why. So in rural areas, actually the level of refusal is far lower. In urban areas, it's higher, but they say that's probably because it's more complex in an urban area because of the different factors that would have to be weighed up. But by and large, there isn't a problem getting planning permission. And the number of planning permissions are far, far in excess, all of the time, than the number of commencements and completions. And they go on to say that very possibly the explanation for why we're failing to deliver in the actual output of housing is because of speculation and land banking and so on. They're speculating, I just speculate that the property people are speculating. Right, and that the evidence would suggest that may well be the case. And of course, to be honest, the dogs on the street know that's true. Right, and we can all see examples of it in our own area where they have the planning permission, they have the SDZ and the whole bleeding lot, but it takes years and years and years because they drip feed the development in order to suit themselves, whether they're flipping property, sitting on it, waiting for the market conditions to be suitable for them to maximise the profit, or whatever it might be, or for government to legislate even more in their favour, or to get more subsidies from the government to build infrastructure, or whatever it is. Right? So the market dictating, and that is the problem, not the question of planning permission. And this also brings me to one of the big omissions in the bill, which is where are the use it and lose it provisions? Right? Where are the use it and lose it provisions? Because if land banking and hoarding and speculating is a problem, we should have the use it or lose it provisions that government has been promising for a quite considerable amount of time, and many of us have been demanding for a very, very long time. That they shouldn't be allowed to speculate on land, on property, on planning permissions, and so on. And let's not forget, so it was November 2019, Minister Murphy at the time, the Housing Minister, said we would have use it or lose it coming very soon. Didn't come. November 2020, we were told it would be in the coming months. But of course, we have a report, I think from Killian Woods, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, suggesting that the CIF have been lobbying very, very intensely to prevent the use it or lose it provisions being put in the bill. No surprises there. And remember that Killian Woods also reported previously, and I think it was mentioned earlier on the SHD, the ill-fated SHD that did a lot to discredit the entire planning process, that it was lobbying from the developers that led to that legislation, and where he quoted at the time developers saying, quote, "We gave Minister Coveney our recommendations and they took it lock, stock and barrel and stuck it into the new housing bill." So is this more of the same? Is this more of the same? Through omission or through what's in it is actually dancing to the developer's tune, the very thing that has got us into the mess. And of course, I mean, one thing, I should have probably said this earlier in my narrative, I mean, one thing I've always sort of, endlessly repeated is under the old Planning Act of 2000, and I'm sure there's many things need to be changed, I'm not against consolidation and streamlining, but in terms of housing supply, is there evidence that that Act has been a significant obstacle to housing supply over its history? Answer, no. Answer, no. Because in the period running up to 2008, we had 70 to 90,000 houses being built a year. The Planning and Development Act of 2000 didn't inhibit that. Now, there were other problems, places being built on floodplains, places that shouldn't have been built, all sorts of things, environmental damage, and so on and so forth, but that act didn't inhibit supply, right? So the equation that, all these objectors are blocking supply, just not true. There's no flipping evidence for it, and yet we have people jumping up and down from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael saying it all the time. But that is the narrative, of course, of the developers and the property people who make money out of it. And then, of course, we have the measures that may, I'm trying to fully get my head around it, but the access to justice, but looks as if its purpose is to limit the ability of ordinary people and groups in communities who may have genuine concerns about the environmental impact of certain types of developments, whether they're on the marine now with the property developers grabbing our marine just the same way as the property developers dictated on land and led us into an absolute mess. And of course the housing crisis is to do with that. That's the real reason we have a housing crisis, not because of the planning system, but because we had a cowboy housing sector, totally privatised, totally driven by developers, then it crashes, and then we have 10 years of a desert because the developers decide it's not profitable for them to build housing, and the government compounds that decision by stopping building public housing for a decade, and even worse, when it has all the land banks briefly in its hands with NAMA, what does it do? Does it build public and affordable housing? Does it move away from a developer-led system? No, it flogs it all back to a new gang of speculators. Or in some cases, the same old speculators, but now working in conjunction with hedge funds and wealth asset management companies from all over the world who are seeking to profit, benefit and exploit from the housing misery that is being visited on the people of this country. But back to the access to justice issues, it certainly seems to me, when I look at some of the campaigns we've had in our local area with groups like, for example, Save Our Seafront, who in my mind have done our local community a big service in stopping completely inappropriate development on key areas like Dunleary Harbour, on the seafront, that would have damaged our environment, our local amenities, marine life and so on. They effectively will be prohibited from taking judicial reviews in certain cases. All the chips are going to be stacked in favour of the developers who have the money. They have the money. They're not worried about costs, but it is ordinary community groups who are now going to have more hoops or whatever the expression to jump through in order to actually, and it'll be left up to a minister who's now, and I mean, just to say a word in 40 seconds about the centralisation of power that this bill seems to involve, in ministers doing up plans without proper accountability to this House and proper involvement to this House, but who will, the Minister for Environment, eventually will effectively decide what local community or resident groups can actually take judicial reviews and what the costs involved of those things will be. But it seems to me clear there will be a chilling effect, or indeed it will be made harder for local groups to have access to justice when it comes to important developments that impact on them and their local communities and local environment, and that is both unnecessary and completely unfair, and may well be in conflict, probably is, with the Our House Convention obligations.